You're sitting at your kitchen table on a Sunday morning, coffee getting cold, staring at a pre qualification letter. You and your partner together make $150,000 a year, top 20% of American households. The bank says you're approved for $720,000. You pull up listings in your market. Everything decent is $650,000 to $750,000. You should feel excited. Instead, you're doing mental math on the back of an envelope and none of it adds up. That mortgage payment, even at these rates, would be $4,800 a month. Add insurance, taxes, maintenance, you'd be spending 60% of your take home income on housing. Suddenly, this approval feels less like opportunity and more like a noose with a bow on it. Sound familiar? If you're in a dual income household making good money and still feeling like you can't afford what previous generations bought on single incomes, you're not imagining it. You're experiencing something that happened quietly over the past 40 years. A systematic repricing of housing that didn't just track inflation, but specifically targeted what dual income households could borrow. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how housing prices rose to capture every dollar of that second income. I'll reveal the complete monthly cost breakdown that proves you're not being dramatic about affordability. I'll introduce you to a real household making $150,000 who can barely make it work. I'll expose who profits from keeping you in this trap. And I'll give you permission to see alternatives as success rather than failure. Here's the central question. How did dual income, what was supposed to double your opportunities, become the minimum requirement just to break even in housing? Let's start with the numbers everyone quotes but nobody explains. In 1985, the median home price was 2.8 times median household income. By 2024, it's 5.8 times. You've heard that before. But here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't gradual inflation. This wasn't market forces doing their natural thing. When you chart housing prices against income over time, there's a clear inflection point. Mid 1970s, right when dual income households became normalized in American culture, housing prices didn't rise despite dual incomes. They rose because of them. Here's the mechanism. Lenders saw two incomes in a household instead of one. They updated their borrowing formulas. Sellers saw new borrowing capacity. They raised prices to match. The market essentially said, oh, so you have two incomes now? Then you can afford to pay twice as much. This isn't speculation. Federal Reserve data shows mortgage approval algorithms changed specifically to count dual incomes as permanent household income, not risky additional income. The lending industry saw an opportunity. They took it. What happened next was predictable. As more households sent both partners into the workforce, housing prices rose to absorb that additional borrowing capacity. The price-to-income ratio climbed steadily. What was once achievable on a single income now required two. Then those two incomes became the baseline assumption. The goalposts didn't just move, they were deliberately relocated to a place that required exactly what most households could now borrow. Your second income didn't give you advantage. It reset the price of admission. Now let me show you what that looks like in real life. Meet Sarah and Marcus. She's 38, marketing director making $72,000. He's 41, senior project manager making $78,000. Combined gross income, $150,000. Two kids, ages 4 and 7. They live in Charlotte, North Carolina, a median-priced market. Last year, they bought an average home for $675,000. They put 10% down, got a 7% interest rate. By every conventional measure, they should be comfortable. Upper middle class. Financially secure. Let's look at what that actually means monthly. Gross income, $12,500. Sounds substantial. Now the deductions. Federal taxes, $2,100. State taxes, $650. FICA, $956. Take-home pay, $8,794. That's the money that actually hits their account each month. Now the housing costs. Mortgage payment at 7% on $600,000 borrowed, i.e. $4,493. Property taxes, $843. Homeowners insurance, $385. PMI, because they only put 10% down, $281. HOA fees, $150. Maintenance reserve at 1% of home value annually, $562. Total housing cost, $6,714 per month. Look at that number. Really look at it. And they're spending 76% of their take home income on housing alone, before food, before utilities, before healthcare, before saving a single dollar. You might think that's unsustainable. You'd be right, but we're not done yet. Here's where it gets brutal. Because Sarah and Marcus both work, certain costs become non optional. These aren't luxuries. These are the expenses that exist purely because they're a dual income household. Two car payments because they both need to commute, Andrew $847. Two car insurance policies, 285. Gas for two separate commutes, 420. Childcare for two kids because both parents work, 2,400. Work wardrobes, dry cleaning, lunches out when too exhausted to pack, 380. Let's add those up. $4,332 in costs that exist only because they're a dual income household. These aren't choices, they're requirements. Now add the housing costs. 6,714 plus 4,332. That's $11,046 per month. Their take-home income is 8,794. They're spending 126% of their take-home income on just housing and work-required expenses. Before groceries, before utilities, before healthcare premiums, before internet, phones, clothing for the kids, before birthday presents or school supplies or field trips, before saving anything for retirement or emergencies or their kids' future. They're already $2,252 in the hole every single month. This is a household making $150,000 a year, top 20% of American earners. This is the math, this is the reality. And you're not being dramatic when you say housing feels impossible. So how do they actually make it work? Credit cards for grocery overflow, currently carrying $8,400 in revolving balances. Zero retirement contributions despite employer matches they're leaving on the table. $240 in their checking account 3 days before payday. A hospital payment plan for Marcus's appendectomy last year still carrying $4,900. Both of their retirement accounts combined, $31,000. They're in their late 30s. They have equity in their house, technically. $67,500 on paper, but they can't access it without selling. Here's what that actually feels like day to day. It feels like Sarah crying in the Target parking lot because their 7-year-old needs new shoes and they're $35, but it's 3 days until payday and the account is at $127. It feels like Marcus eating gas station food for lunch every day to avoid $12 restaurant meals. It feels like whispering fights about money after the kids are asleep. Maybe if you hadn't bought, it feels like their 7-year-old asking why they can't go on vacation like her classmates do. It feels like declining wedding invitations because travel costs are impossible. It feels like Sarah's mother offering to pay for groceries and the hot shame of accepting. It feels like both of them working through illness because they've already used their PTO for house emergencies. It feels like the simultaneous relief and terror of every paycheck. Briefly solvent, immediately depleted. The second income didn't double their prosperity. It enabled them to barely afford what they couldn't afford at all on one income. And now both incomes are required just to keep the lights on. But here's what nobody tells you. This didn't happen by accident. 3 specific mechanisms transformed dual income from advantage to requirement. Let me show you how the trap was engineered. Mechanism 1. Lending ratio changes. Before 1970, lenders used conservative guidelines. 25% of gross income for housing costs. That was the standard. By the 2000s, it's 43% debt-to-income ratio, sometimes 50% with compensating factors. This change happened specifically as dual incomes normalized. Lenders realized they could push ratios higher when both spouses worked. If one person lost their job, the other still had income, so they increased what they'd approve. The market called it reducing risk. What it actually did was increase how much households could borrow, and when households could borrow more, sellers raised prices to match. Mechanism 2. The household income sleight of hand. Housing prices are quoted against household income. And when economists say housing is 5.8 times household income, they're comparing to a 2-income household. That's the baseline assumption now. But if you're a single earner trying to buy that same house, you're facing 8 to 11 times your individual income. The goalposts moved. The statistics hide it. When previous generations bought homes at 3 times household income, that was often 1 income. When we buy homes at 6 times household income, that's 2 incomes. The comparison isn't even measuring the same thing anymore. Mechanism 3, geographic concentration. High paying jobs clustered in expensive cities. You can't just take your $75,000 salary to a cheap market. That job doesn't exist there. The data shows it clearly. 68% of six-figure jobs are in the top 25 metro areas. In those metros, median homes exceed $550,000. The system created a perfect trap. The jobs that pay enough to qualify for housing require living where that's barely enough. You're geographically imprisoned by your own career. Then there's the cultural programming. HGTV showing dual income couples casually buying $800,000 homes like it's normal. Starter home redefined from 1,200 square feet to 2,500 square feet. Social media showing everyone seemingly affording luxury while hiding their financial struggle. The narrative normalized crushing debt, made it look like success. Phrases like house poor is normal for the first few years became accepted wisdom. The trap was built into the culture itself. You want to know who profits? Let's follow the money on Sarah and Marcus's $675,000 purchase. The real estate agents on both sides of the transaction split $20,250 in commission, 6% of the sale price. They make more money when you pay more. The lender collects $13,500 in origination fees and closing costs on the $540,000 mortgage. Bigger loan, bigger fees. The mortgage insurance company gets $281 every single month in PMI because Sarah and Marcus could only put 10% down. The county gets $843 monthly in property taxes. That's $10,116 a year forever. The insurance company gets $385 monthly for homeowners insurance, $4,620 annually, added up. On this one transaction, the real estate industry extracted $20,250. The lending industry extracted $13,500 upfront and will collect hundreds of thousands in interest over 30 years. The mortgage insurance company will collect over $3,000 annually until Sarah and Marcus reach 20% equity. Local government will collect over $10,000 annually as long as they own the home. Everyone in this chain makes more money when the buyer pays more. Nobody makes money when you say no thanks. Now let's talk about the messaging designed to maximize what you'll pay. You're approved for up to ... That number anchors your expectations high. Mortgage calculators that show only principal and interest. They hide taxes, insurance, maintenance, and make payments look affordable. Marketing about affordable monthly payments instead of total cost. Pre-qualification letters that tell you the maximum you could borrow, not what you can actually afford. The entire system is designed to push you toward your borrowing ceiling, not to protect your financial health. The trap gets tighter. Both incomes are now required to make the mortgage payment. Sarah can't quit her job even though she wants to. Marcus can't take a pay cut to do work he'd find more meaningful. Neither can stay home with the kids without risking foreclosure. The second income, which was supposed to give them options, became golden handcuffs. They can't move to a cheaper area because their jobs are here. They can't switch careers because they need these specific salaries. They're imprisoned by their own success. And here's the psychological component. They know they're trapped, but leaving feels impossible. They've already invested the down payment. That's $67,500 they can't get back without selling. They've made it work for a year. Sunk cost fallacy says keep going. Everyone they know is in the same situation. Social proof says this is normal. They've internalized financial anxiety as adult responsibility. And opting out would feel like admitting failure. The stress shows up everywhere. Sleep problems, relationship strain, resentment between partners about who's pulling their weight financially. Health problems from chronic stress. The cost of being house poor isn't just financial. It's physical, psychological, relational. But the system doesn't measure those costs. It only measures whether you're making your payments. Let me give you permission to do something radical. Look at that pre-qualification letter. Do the real math, all of it, not just the mortgage payment. And then say no. You're allowed to say no. If you're spending more than 50% of your take-home income on housing and work-required expenses, you're not building wealth. You're trapped in expensive survival. That's the threshold. If you're making $150,000 and spending above 7,000 per month on housing plus childcare plus commuting, you've crossed from investment into trap territory. The math doesn't support it. It cannot support it. It will not support it. Here are the alternatives nobody frames as success but should. Renting isn't failure. It's liquidity and flexibility, with risk transferred to a landlord. When the water heater breaks, you make a phone call. When you want to move for a better opportunity, you give notice. You're not locked in. Buying 30 to 40% below your approval amount isn't settling. It's keeping your career and life options open. It's having margin for unexpected expenses and opportunities. It's being able to quit a toxic job without risking homelessness. Staying in a smaller house longer isn't losing. It's building actual equity while maintaining financial breathing room. Moving to a lower cost area for remote work isn't retreat. It's geographic arbitrage and life quality. Your dollar goes further, your stress goes down. That's winning. A manufactured home on owned land isn't poverty. It's paid off shelter and financial freedom. Multi-generational housing isn't failure to launch. It's pooled resources and built-in community and childcare. These aren't consolation prizes. They're strategic choices that prioritize your actual well-being over maximizing square footage. The goal isn't owning the most house the bank says you can afford. The goal is building a life with options, margin, and breathing room. Real wealth isn't the address. It's the freedom to make choices based on what you want, not what you can barely sustain. Sarah and Marcus, they're considering selling. Moving to a paid-off manufactured home on 3 acres they can buy outright. Finally, having money for experiences instead of interest payments. Having time with their kids instead of working every weekend to cover overages. That's not giving up, that's waking up. The American dream didn't die, it was repackaged as a trap, specifically designed for dual income households. You're allowed to see it for what it is. You're allowed to refuse to play a game where the only winning move is not playing. Your dual income didn't double your opportunity. It doubled the price of admission, then made both incomes mandatory forever. But you can choose differently. You can do the math, see the trap, and walk away. That's not failure. That's the smartest financial decision you'll ever make.